Okay, today is Saturday, August 29th, 2020, and I'm sitting here with Ed LaFrance. Ed LaFrance is someone that I have known for quite a long time. I met him when I was a teenager. I was probably 15 or 16 years old when I met him, which was probably around, 1983, I'm guessing, maybe a little earlier.
Yeah.
83, about?
82, 83 would be my guess.
Okay. And we met, I think we originally met on a film that was being made called The Clone. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I met you, at the time you were doing the practical effects on The Clone. Would you say that's what you were busy working on?
For what little there was, yeah. I was also just generally working, as like a lighting grip.
Were you?
Yeah, handling some, equipment, general, lackey, production assistant type stuff, a little bit of everything. There wasn't a lot of physical effects on The Clone.
Right.
There was a couple of moments with having to do with some laboratory equipment where there was a few effects, but mostly it was just running around shooting a lot of live action and handling a lot of props, lighting equipment, sandbags and stands and reflectors and ramps and all that junk that we had, the dolly, working like a typical gaffer or grip.
Okay, but at the time, if I remember correctly, because it was you and Adam Moes had both, you were sort of a team on The Clone, and you guys were both doing the effects together, right? Because that's what I remember when I was working on that movie, watching you guys put together all this lab equipment and stuff in The Clone. A clone has to be grown in a lab, and you were creating out of what I remember was like a Sparkletts water bottle or something, some kind of weird. This is a very low budget.
It was supposed to be,
San Francisco State film. And were you and Adam friends with anybody from the film at the time, or how did you get hooked into that one?
So Adam was going to SF State.
Oh, he was. Okay,
so
he was in the film school.
He was in the film school, and
so Adam knew John Kroll, and that's
John Kroll,
okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And by this time, Adam and I had finished our short film, our science fiction fantasy short film, which had a lot of effects work in it. Very low budget, but it was there.
That was Flights of
Fantasy.
Okay,
which you've seen, yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm sure that Adam showed John the film. John was, duly impressed that we had, done that with so little, and probably talked his way into working on John's film, The Clone.
And dragged you into it.
And dragged me, willingly. I mean, I was...
Sure.
Adam was a connection to getting us involved in more film projects. We wanted to work, he and I still wanted to work on film projects together, doing various types of visual effects and special work. And so I guess John had this artificial womb that had to be constructed
for the clone
to be grown in, right? And so that was going to fall on us. There were a couple other special shots that were never executed, that were planned, like the headquarters of the genetic engineering company that he had dreamt up for his screenplay was supposed to have like a fancy front, so we were going to
like a futuristic
front, futuristic signage, and we were supposed to fake up something that never happened.
Yeah, but there was a building, if I remember correctly, there was a building that had been constructed out by Candlestick Park at the time, which actually said, I think it was like Knoll, Knoll, which was oddly close to Kroll at the time. And I think that was the building, if I remember correctly, that ended up getting used for that shot.
It was a big black glass building.
Yes,
and so we actually talked about doing like something like a foreground miniature to put this very impressive monument sign in front of it that would be lit up and stuff. But ultimately what happened was that Adam cut a single G letter out of some foam core, and we stuck it to the side of the building with some gaffer's tape.
Oh, funny.
And that became the signage. So once again, low budget prevailed. The artificial womb, you remember, was not a Sparkletts bottle. Actually, we were given a lavish budget of something like $200 to come up with that. Now, I was hoping that we would go to some surplus store and scrounge some old equipment panels and tanks and get some plywood and sort of build something that at least looks substantial. But Adam had a different idea, and he basically did most of it himself. He went to a plastic supply store and had them cut him some sections of big clear acrylic cylinder, literally like about a 16-inch diameter acrylic cylinder, which you could buy in like quarter-inch thickness. They sliced him some sections of that. So he had these discs that were like about 6 inches tall, that were like a ring, and then he used some clear tubing to join it together with some additional band details, and that became the artificial womb. So it kind of looked like a terrarium, like something you would stick a turtle in. Okay, he had a pet turtle, and then we came up with I made a fake baby out of some sponge and a doll, and then we had one of the guys we knew who was into electronics rigged up this tiny little blinking lights panel, and it honestly did not look like it could give birth to anything except some sea monkeys. But that's what we came up with. The money was spent, so John went with that.
Right. Okay. Now, taking a step back, you were talking about Flights of Fantasy for a minute, and that was a Super 8 film that was loaded with visual effects that you and Adam had put together when you were, I'm guessing in high school. Oh no, wait! You said this was when Adam was in film school.
Adam was in high school.
Oh, he was in high school.
He was in high school. I believe that he was a senior at the time, and I was a freshman. So I was a freshman in like 80, 81.
Okay.
So that was when, and I'm not sure if we started it before I became a freshman. My sister, who was older than me, was going to school with him, and she connected the two of us, and then we started working on that project. And it took us a good couple of years to complete it because it was financed with lunch money and created with lots of found objects, and whatever we could scrounge.
Well, and you guys were making, the effects, because it was all Super 8, so you really had to fool the camera in many cases, but you had spaceships in it, you had battle scenes with the spaceships, you had miniatures, you had built models of a house burning down, and there was just a lot of sleight of hand going on that looked, as far as Super 8 goes, and I shot a lot of Super 8, the stuff that you guys were doing was pretty complex.
Yeah, it was. And there was tons of outtakes. Reams and reams of failed shots and stuff that didn't work. We were trying to do multiple exposures on Super 8, which is really hard if you've ever tried it. The cartridge is just not designed for the film to move backwards and forwards. And there is a way to rewind Super 8 so you can do multiple exposures, but it's a very imperfect method that is prone to a lot of failures, and we had a lot of them. And so we threw away 5 times as much film, maybe 10 times as much as what you saw. But yeah, ultimately I think what we got on film came out pretty good.
Yeah, I remember you could get a thing called a backwinder where you would take the film cartridge, and stick it in this little plastic thing that it would fit into, and it had a crank on it, and you would rewind the film after it was shot, so you wouldn't expose it to light a second time until you put it back in the camera. But you couldn't. It was kind of a sort of a way to cheat optical printing, but you had to get it right. Which was hard to know. It was impossible to know what you shot previously in order to line up what you were now trying to shoot the second time through.
We were inspired by an old science fiction TV series called Space 1999 that was made in the 1970s. This actually was popular. It was only 2 seasons. Only the first season was really that popular. Starred Martin Landau and Barbara Bain. They were fresh off of Mission Impossible.
Okay.
And they got hooked up with a production company in Britain who wanted to make a big budget sci-fi film, and they largely succeeded, and the effects team had to produce a lot of outer space stuff with a lot of composite images, and there was, despite the fact that they had large budgets, a lot of that money went into these really lavish sets and costumes and stuff. There was not a lot of money for like optical printing, so that, because that's an expensive process, and generally you need to use large format film, blah blah. Anyway, so that show, they kind of perfected the art of doing multiple in-camera exposures for that kind of outer space stuff. So we read a lot about what they did. We basically copied their techniques. The problem is we didn't have the equipment. Like you said, Super 8. I had the backwinder. I bought it out of the back of like Film Magic magazine or Cinemagic. I
remember that. I remember.
Yeah, it was a little bit. It's actually a metal box.
And it was like $50 or something. Yeah, I remember the backwinder.
You would put masking tape over the take-up drive when you shot the first pass, so the film would just kind of loosely loop into the take-up side.
I see.
That allowed you to rewind it, because that thing only turned, the take-up only turned one way. It was a ratchet.
Right.
But I mean, you'd tear sprockets and it would slip, and it was scratched and everything. There's a gigantic pile of celluloid that's just full of ruined images and light fogged film, it was miserable.
So what was the goal of Flights of Fantasy at the time? I mean, you guys were younger. You know, the story actually I thought was really well done. It was a clever idea. It was, you know, a kid in kind of a big Tinker Toy spaceship that he had created that turns into a real spaceship, and then they fly around space and get, you know, into these space battles and so on. Which I thought was a pretty clever idea, and you executed it really well. But initially, when you and Adam were talking about this project, what do you think the goal was, or what were you trying to? Were you trying to sort of develop your skills with visual effects, with storytelling, with model building, all of it? Were you going to enter this in contests, or, you know, what was the general idea?
I think everything was on the table. I mean, we both wanted to do fantasy type filmmaking. Okay. I was more interested in it from the standpoint of the sort of the magician's sleight of hand approach.
Yeah.
To me, it was the idea of being able to create these images that could pass as real or nearly real, you know, out of completely artificial creations was exciting. Adam liked that, but he also was interested in filmmaking, telling a story. Mm-hmm. You know, so Flights of Fantasy was his story. Mm-hmm. He basically storyboarded the whole thing. It didn't really have a script, as you could probably tell from watching it. The dialogue was made up on the spot, but the progression of the story was all planned out. Every shot, mm-hmm. basically, that you saw had been planned out using storyboarding. And we did think that, hey, if we pulled this off, you know, this becomes part of like your demo reel. This mm-hmm. is like a calling card to mm-hmm. now go and potentially get some work in the Bay Area or wherever. So that was sort of the idea behind it. And of course, the thing took on a life of its own. We had no idea what we were getting into, the amount of work involved, the time involved, you know, and the fact that, you know, we both were going to school. He had a job. I think I had a job at the time. So finding the time to work on this was mm-hmm. meant that it was a few hours a week and maybe a long day on the weekend, and mm-hmm. it just turned into a really big thing. But yeah, we had hoped that, and it ended up doing what we thought it would do. It got us on the Clone,
right?
Got us on
right.
The Devil's Gift, got us on Star Worms, and then it got me to realize that this was not the route I wanted to go with my life anymore.
Exactly. Well, and to take a step back even further, before you did Flights of Fantasy, I'm guessing, now what year was Flights of Fantasy?
So I feel like, you know, dates are a little fuzzy. Adam was either a junior or a senior in high school when we started it, and we mostly finished it before he moved to SF. So he moved to SF pretty much right after graduating. So either the fall of that year or possibly the winter of the following year he was enrolled. That would have been for him like 82-ish,
okay.
probably, you know.
Okay.
So we were probably working on it from 80 to 82.
Okay.
And then he had to actually do some post-production work when he was in San Francisco, some of the sound and editing and stuff.
So 80 to 82 about, right?
Yeah,
so you're 3 years out from the release of Star Wars at that time, and this film involves a lot of spaceships and miniatures. I mean, you built spaceships that you had flying through space and everything. How much of an influence at the time was Star Wars that had come out and that kind of filmmaking?
Pretty huge.
Yeah. I think we were all kind of headed in that direction after Star Wars kind of came out. There was a lot of influence for many people, especially in San Francisco. I mean, everywhere, but because Lucas was here. Yeah.
You figured that it would resonate with people. Mm-hmm. You know, Star Wars was not my favorite film. I wasn't really a Star Wars fan. I was more of a Close Encounters guy.
How about Adam?
I couldn't. I actually,
you don't know?
You'd have to ask him.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think the idea of these two kids building this play spaceship that in their minds turns into this real thing.
Right.
And they fight. The fantasy aspect of it was his style.
Okay.
And that was kind of what drove it. I mean, we could have gone a different direction, and it could have been them fantasizing about being in some, other world, like a medieval world, like a Lord of the Rings thing or something, but that would have been a lot harder for us to pull off. So.
Okay. Well, now that eventually, so you used Flights of Fantasy kind of as a calling card that got you work on the Clone. I met you on the Clone. Around 83, I think we decided, something around there.
It's around there.
There, and got to know you on that film. Got to know you and Adam and plenty of other people too. By the way, I don't remember all the names. There was like Dave Baker, who was the DP,
the cameraman. Yeah.
There was. I remember some woman named Celeste. She
was the star.
She was. Celeste was the star.
I
Okay.
remember her name
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it was
yeah.
like Coit Tower. I'm like, yeah, that's
Okay.
easy to remember.
Okay.
She played the lead female role.
Uh-huh.
The dude who played there was like two male lead roles. There was like a villain and a hero, or
Okay.
there was a villain. There were two villains and a hero.
Uh-huh.
There was a young guy who played her love interest, though she was married, very naughty. There's the guy who played her husband, who was the priest. Right.
Right,
So
I remember a priest character.
Science
Yeah.
and religion was
Right,
there.
right.
And then there was the draconian, type A driven boss of the genetic research firm who was pushing for this clone project. And when he finds out the technology's been stolen, it was, you know what? It was an interesting story. That's all. I'm going to say that. I'm going to stop there. I read the screenplay.
Uh-huh.
I felt like this may look good on paper, but it's not going to film well.
Uh-huh.
And that unfortunately turned to be true because I thought it was a great story. And I don't want to take over this whole thing, but that John, that was based on a short film he made.
Okay.
And
No, I don't know if I know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
He
Or maybe
made
I
a
did at
short
one point.
film. Oh, well, no, it wasn't based on it, but he did a short film, and I take it back. It wasn't based on a short film, but he made a short film about an isolation chamber experiment.
Okay.
That kind of goes sideways.
Okay.
When he was in this film school.
Yeah.
And he made it, and like 8 months later, Altered States came out, which was about isolation chambers and altered states of consciousness.
Right.
And it had a very similar theme, and everyone thought, wow, this guy's he's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on in Hollywood before they even know.
Right.
And so when he did The Clone, I think he felt like he had a property that was kind of like forward thinking. And I think in a lot of ways it was, but he needed someone else to actually write the screenplay.
Okay. Well, and he was also really into Robert Silverberg, the author Robert Silverberg at the time, and I think optioned a couple of stories of his.
The option
was
one
very
called To Live Again.
To Live Again, right, yeah.
I was in those pre-production meetings for like a year.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay. I remember after we shot The Clone, and then it was finished, and we saw, I think the premiere was at the Castro Theater, on Castro Street in San Francisco, that had the player organ, and it was beautiful, really beautiful space.
Yeah, I invited all my friends.
Did you?
And they were all stoned.
Yeah,
And
well,
I'm
sure everyone in the theater was stoned.
There's a lot of laughter at moments where there was no actual intentional humor in the screenplay.
Right.
People were laughing their asses off.
I made so many friendships back then that a lot of them I still have to this day.
And that's cool.
You're one of them, and I know that after The Clone was done. Oh, by the way, do you remember the catchphrase? You remember we all had the T-shirts?
I had the T-shirt and it said "The Clone" and
the clone,
like doubled up.
but there was also the something like when you've abandoned. What is it when you? Something it was, oh gosh, now I can't think of it. It was kind of a takeoff of the Stuntman, which is if God could do the tricks we can, he'd be a happy man. And so there was some sort of spin for the Clone slogan, which was when you start playing with human lives, you've already abandoned the rules, I think is what it was.
That's cool.
Do you remember that when you start playing with human lives, you've already abandoned the rules, which I thought was kind of a cool. Yeah, that black.
I had to pay for it.
You did, I'm sure I probably had to pay for mine too.
Hey, look, guys! I got shirts for the crew. They're only $8 each.
Yeah.
Dude, you've already gotten like so many pints of blood out of me. Now you want $8 for a shirt? Okay, here you go.
I wish I still had that shirt. I don't have it anymore, but I remember wearing it all the time.
It was really cheaply
I
made.
think I wore it like a million times until it just
cheaply
probably
made,
fell
like
off.
the film it represented.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
So
wait, before we move on, you got to
Okay.
tell me how you got involved in The Clone. Because I don't know if we ever really got all the skinny.
You know what? My mom sent me to this drama camp for a couple of years, and it was this up in Point Arena, California, which is sort of in Mendocino County, I think, or at least kind of near Mendocino. And it was probably like an hour away from Mendocino, the town of Mendocino, and this drama camp was this former commune kind of in the middle of nowhere. It was this big piece of like farmland, and it didn't have any electricity. It had direct current from a windmill, and that was cool. Pretty much it. It had running water, as I remember, but all of on this giant piece of land, there were all of these different kinds of living quarters that you could stay in, like river yurts and tree houses. And they had the main properties were across this river, which were these two geodesic domes, these R. Buckminster Fuller geodesic domes. And you would go, and then they had this big like community house that had sort of like a indoor basketball court that we were using, and a kitchen. And you would get up early in the morning, and they would blow these like conch shells to sort of wake everybody up, and you'd go get this like breakfast, and then you would rehearse these plays or these scenes or sketches or whatever that you're going to do all day. And so I kind of went to this drama camp, and that was owned by the Krolls. John's parents, Lawrence or Redwood was his nickname, and Margaret, I think was her name, or Savitri is the name that she went by, which is Save a Tree. And I believe John had grown up on this commune called Oz, that they would have various, events or maybe corporate retreats or something like that. And so for a 2-week period every summer, they had this drama camp. And so I went to that for a couple of summers and had met John. And John was a student at San Francisco State. And at the time, my mom was going to Stanford University. She was studying to get her PhD, so I was living in Palo Alto at the time. And then John asked me if I wanted to work on this film. He was making this feature film called The Clone that he was putting together as his, I guess, final project for San Francisco State. And so I said I would work on the production when I could. I can't remember if it was shot during the summer. Something tells me it was, because I know we went up to Oz for a few days, and I know I was up there for that shoot the whole time. I don't know. It's possible that I just basically left school for a few days and, went up and did that, or also it was shot during the summer. I'm not really sure. Seems to me it would have been shot during the summer
It
because
was.
Yeah, because all the San Francisco State film students would have then been free to.
Well, and also for weather considerations.
Sure.
Because a lot of it was shot in and around the Northern California Bay Area and coast. And
right.
You don't want to be stuck in rain squalls and stuff. We had some sunny days. It wasn't too cold. So it was decent weather for filming.
Okay. And so, yeah, I ended up working on The Clone and had a fun time, I guess, doing that. I didn't really have any official capacity and actually didn't do much, but I was there on set, and probably, I don't even know. I don't think the film's available to watch anywhere. I can't find it anywhere. And I probably, if I even have a credit on it, was like a production assistant or something like that. But I honestly didn't do very much, even though I kind of watched them. It was the first time I'd seen a film, like a feature film being made. And after The Clone was over, I know that you and I and Adam kept in touch. I kept in touch with a lot of people from that film. And people kind of went their separate directions, but you and Adam were still working on other little low-budget projects. And the one that I remember in particular that I participated in, which was in 1984, and I don't know how long this one lasted for, but we were on a horse ranch in Petaluma in a barn for, in my mind, it was like 2 months, but it might have only been 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the time frame was. But we were working on this film, and you'll tee this up a little bit better than I will, but I'll give it a shot anyway. We were working on a film called The Devil's Gift. And I didn't know what I was doing there. All I know is I got a call from you and Adam asking if I would come and work on the effects on this movie called The Devil's Gift up in Petaluma. And it was on this ranch, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I seem to remember driving from San Francisco with Adam. I might be making that up in my mind, but I seem to remember driving in a car with Adam up to the ranch in Petaluma, and the next thing I know, I was in this barn day after day after day for whatever, 15, 17 hours with a glue gun, and we were making a miniature, we were building a model, and by the way, we were in a horse barn with a horse.
Yes,
if I remember.
Horse.
There was actually a stud horse that they would occasionally come and they would take it out of the barn to go impregnate another horse, and then they'd bring him back, and the whole time we would be building this model of this Victorian house that at the end of the period that we were building this model, they brought in a pyrotechnics team and they blew it up.
Yep.
And they filmed it in slow motion, and I remember watching this model that we had taken all this time to put together just becoming incinerated in a ball of flame and debris.
It was glorious.
It was awesome, actually. And at the time, my father was waiting for me in Los Angeles because the 1984 Olympics were going on in Los Angeles, but I wanted to stay and watch them demolish and blow up this Victorian house. So I did that, and then the next day I flew to Los Angeles, probably from San Francisco, and went and saw some Olympic Games. I missed maybe a couple of days of it or something. I missed the opening ceremonies, but it was worth it to see this Victorian house just be getting blown up. If you watch the film called The Devil's Gift, and it may have a different title or not, I know
The Devil's Gift was the title they gave it for release. It was originally called The Birthday Gift. So, and when you were working on it, it might have been called The Birthday Gift. And then the producer that picked it up, the distribution company that picked it up, said, no one's going to know it's a horror film, so we'll call it The
Devil's Gift.
Yeah.
Well, I know that it's available on YouTube. You can go and watch the movie. I've posted it on Facebook a couple of times, and you can see in the opening 3 or 4 minutes the model that we built that then gets struck by lightning, and for some reason lightning just happens to blow up the entire house into a giant fireball.
The tower
because
room,
that's what lightning does. And it eventually became a featured film on Mystery Science Theater 2000 or something like that.
An edited version of it. So the writer, producer, director Ken Breton actually moved to LA after he got that distribution deal for The Devil's Gift and lived down there pretty much till he died, and hustled projects, tried to pitch projects, all kinds of projects, unsuccessfully till he landed a deal. I think again he self-financed, called Merlin's Shop of Mystical Wonders, and what it was an anthology. Barely, it had basically 2 stories with a wraparound. And the wraparound was a grandfather babysitting his son. The grandfather was played by Ernest Borgnine, who apparently needed money, and they actually are watching The Devil's Gift when the film opens. So we got to reuse that whole opening sequence that we created. Was used again in Merlin. Then the power goes out in the house, and Grandpa has to tell his son a story, old school style. And he tells him a story about Merlin's shop. And so there was a new segment about Merlin and his shop. And what do you know? Merlin's shop has a wind-up toy monkey. And some guy steals the monkey. Some thief decides that's the most valuable thing in Merlin's shop, steals it. And then that monkey ends up being given to some little kid in the second segment as a birthday gift. That's where he picks up with basically rehashing The Devil's Gift as a short story. He cut it down to about 35 or 40 minutes.
Okay.
And it's the second segment of this anthology that's a wraparound story.
Okay.
He did change the ending, however. Everyone did not die in the end. They were able to stop the monkey from clanging his cymbals, and everyone lived happily ever after.
Right, because the monkey, the wind-up monkey in Devil's Gift is the possessed toy that is it's possessed by the spirit of evil, and it's the entity that they have to stop. Right.
Whenever it winds up and clangs its cymbals, someone dies. A house blows up.
Right.
Cars collide. Things happen.
Right. Yeah.
So they were able to, and the way the original movie ended was a little dark, in that the monkey ends up back in the house against all odds.
Okay.
And clangs its cymbals, and screen goes black, and you hear screaming and fire and stuff like that.
So evil wins in the original Devil's Gift.
But in the rehash Merlin, evil's defeated by love and happy endings.
Of course. Yeah. Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was the story of. I mean, I've got a lot of anecdotes about The Devil's Gift. I don't know if we have time to get into all of them.
There were so many. I mean, in the period of time that we were there, I will say that I can't remember. There were a lot of people on this horse ranch that we were on, and I don't know how to explain. It was sort of the cast of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes, the extended version.
It was the cast of Texas Chainsaw Massacre if they were trying to make a low budget horror film, as opposed to trying to keep Grandpa alive.
Yeah.
And it was just a series of the most bizarre episodes that I think I've probably ever had. I had no idea what was going on the whole time. I'm the 17-year-old kid working on this movie. I really have no idea what I'm doing. It would be one of these things where I think I hadn't taken a shower for a few days.
None of us had.
And I wanted a shower, and there was this main house, so Ken, the director, his parents allowed me to use their bathroom.
So nice of them.
To take a shower finally, and after being in this horse barn for several days in a row, and
smelling really nice.
So I got in the shower, and I was in there for maybe 3 minutes before his father. I think it was his father.
Yes.
This guy was ancient, and so the cast of Texas Chainsaw Massacre started pounding on the doors. I'm like 3 minutes into my shower after 4 or 5 days and screaming at me to get out because I'm using up all their water. And, I don't know how water works on a horse ranch, or like, I think they had a separate tank for water and that was all the water they had or something. It's not like that. A water line.
Pumping it from the horse trough directly to you,
That would have been fine. I just needed to take a shower. I didn't care. But that was probably the fastest shower I think I've ever taken, and got out of there and probably didn't take another shower, or at least waited till, they were out of the house or something. And then there was another little story. There was I guess Ken had a... I don't know if it was his brother or nephew or somebody, but there was this kind of ranch hand guy that was working there, and he was this young kid, and I wanted to go into Petaluma, but I was trapped on this horse ranch because I didn't have a car, and I think I'd gotten a ride, like I said, from Adam, and so I was just sort of couldn't go anywhere, and we were a few miles away from the town of Petaluma. And the thing about the town of Petaluma, if you've ever seen a movie called American Graffiti, that's where they shot all the cruising scenes. That's where George Lucas had shot, all the cars driving around and so on. And I wanted to go to Petaluma and I wanted to see, because people were still cruising every Friday and Saturday night. So I wanted to go into town and see the cruising because of American Graffiti and because of Star Wars and whatever other Lucas films came out at the time.
Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck. That's the other one.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out a way to get to town, and there was this like ranch hand guy, Kenny's nephew or something, and his mom was gone, and there was a car there, and I had a driver's license. I don't think he did, so I told him, I want to go into Petaluma. I want to see Petaluma. I want to see the cruising. So we borrowed his mom's car and drove into Petaluma and saw the cruising and drove around with all the cars and so on, and came back to the ranch, and I remember his mom was there and got really angry that we had gone into Petaluma for some reason, which to this day I don't know what the issue was or whatever, but she didn't want her son to leave this horse ranch for some reason. So
there was a lot of tension.
Yes.
And the thing is, you and I both, we were teenage kids. We were just kind of focused on what we were doing, but it was there.
Yeah.
And what happened is every once in a while we touched a live wire and set off this tension.
Right.
The whole property belonged to Ken's family. Either owned it or leased it. Benton Ranch. Right?
Benton Ranch.
So
okay,
they had several acres. They bred horses.
Yep.
They took in foster kids and did God knows what else to make ends meet.
Right.
And so they had multiple buildings, most of which were just like trailers on the property.
Yep.
And it's where the foster kids lived. And there were several generations living there. There were grandparents, parents, Ken's, and then maybe Ken even had a nephew or something. So they're all, and Ken wanted to be a filmmaker. And so I believe that he was either given or lent money by his own family to get as far as he did.
Right.
And they were shooting that. That film had been in production for a couple of years before we got involved in it. It's another SF State story because one of the original production members, a guy named Jose. I don't know if you ever meet Jose. Do you remember Jose?
No.
Jose was involved in the film and kind of less involved towards the end, but in the live action production part of it, he was involved. He was an SF State student.
Okay.
And that's how Adam met Jose and eventually Ken. That's kind of how we got involved.
Gotcha.
And I don't think that Ken himself was going to SF State. I just don't remember. He just wanted to shoot this film, and because he had to self-finance it, he shot a lot of it on his ranch, on the cheap. It was a start and stop thing. They'd keep running out of money. They shot all the live action first. I was involved in a lot of the live action because I was doing practical effects on that film.
Okay.
Unlike The Clone, we did some fire stuff. We did some things moving by themselves, wire work. We had the monkey. There were some special set pieces that were built, and I was involved in all that. And then the miniature effects and the other stuff, I was involved in that too. So
Gotcha.
I was working on that film for quite a while before you even became involved.
Okay.
But yeah, and then what happened at the end around the time you got involved is that's when the company, I don't remember the name of the company, the producer picked up the distribution rights, pumped a bunch of money into it so we could finish it. And that's how we were able to actually do all the special effects stuff. But yeah, there was a lot of, I think the people on the ranch weren't real thrilled that these teenage kids were running around.
Right.
And we were taking over spaces. You remember we built the miniature set basically in their horse barn.
Yep.
In the concrete area in the middle. So we took over that. They couldn't use the stalls. We took over their breeding barn to be our model shop. The grandma was up there serving us bologna sandwiches and Kool-Aid for lunch every day.
I remember the bologna sandwiches. Yeah. She was actually really nice. She was a sweetheart.
She was Ken's supporter.
Yeah.
Of all the people, all the weird people on that ranch, she was the one who was like, "It's so great what you're doing, and so nice, all you're helping Kenny. This has been his dream forever." And they built that shower set right in their front yard, so poor Bob Mendelsohn could strip down and get in there and be attacked by sewage and hot water by the devil-infested monkey. And we built the tower room set was also built on their property. It was built farther down, and we almost burned the fucking ranch down when we shot that scene. You remember what happened in that
when we blew up the tower?
What happens in the live action part is that she calls the demon down. She's up in her tower room fucking around with her Ouija board, drinking and trying to call the spirit of her long dead husband.
As you do.
Who hasn't done this?
No.
She ends up calling some other spirit. I can't remember. It had some weird name. And the spirit, she's got all these toys. It's like an attic. She's got all these toys in the attic, literally. And then one of them's a monkey. And it inhabits the monkey. And the first thing the monkey does is kill her by having a bookcase fall on her and crush her. She had candles on the table. They fall over. They start the curtains on fire. The whole room starts to go up in fire. And then the lightning bolt hits the tower and it explodes like the Death Star. Which wasn't supposed to be that big of an explosion. That's another.
It was
story.
a massive explosion.
It was dumb.
Yeah,
it was dumb. That's a side story I could get into if we take another minute. But we had to film that live action burning of that set. You see those shots just before it gets hit by lightning, and that was filmed actually on a set that was built outdoors of that octagon shaped tower room. And we set it on fire. And the blaze got really big, and then like the fabrics, like the curtains and stuff, went airborne on fire. It just flew straight up. This thing was like a chimney, this room set, and it just flew straight up and took off. And we're like, it's all grass and fields and trees, and so I don't remember somebody went running like crazy and found this burning shit out there in the field somewhere and stomped it out before it burned the ranch down. The footage looked pretty good though.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I remember at one point we took a break and we went hiking up on one of the hills, and we found there were a group of horses, and I don't know why we did this, but Adam and I jumped on the back of a horse.
Oh my God!
Do you remember this?
No. So, I don't know if I was there.
I think you were, but maybe not. Adam will probably remember this because it was quite painful. So both of us were on the back of, there's no saddle or whatever, what is that thing called? The bridle?
Bridle.
So there's none of that. It was just a horse.
Bareback horse.
We jumped on the back of the horse, and the horse kind of like stood there and walked around and suddenly bucked us off of him, and we flew 30 feet in the air. I don't know how far we flew in the air, but it felt like 30 feet. And did this perfect arc and crash landed on the ground. We're lucky we didn't break our necks.
Yes, you're lucky.
I'm not sure why we climbed up on a horse. Probably because we'd been in a horse barn for so long.
You felt communion with the horses.
Well, the horse in the horse barn was friendly, so therefore aren't all horses friendly?
Of course.
And that horse wasn't going to have it, so he bucked us off his back, and we crashed to the ground. I do remember that being very painful. That was a very strange movie to work on. I thought that at the time, and I didn't know anything about money or creative finance or anything, but I kept a list of all of my hours, and I probably had an hourly rate, and I kept a list of how much I was owed.
Hope
and
springs eternal.
Exactly. And then when I left, I was like, well, I'm going to make a few $1,000s or something, and then, I never saw a penny of it. So, but I did have a great experience, and it's quite funny that the movie ended up on Mystery Science Theater 2000. When I was in graduate school, my phone rang at one point, and it was Ken Burton. It was not Burton. Okay,
Burton is the
Ken Burton. That's how you pronounce it. Burton.
More panache.
I seem to remember Ken Burton, but okay. Ken Burton. So he calls me. This is years later, and he's on the phone with me maybe 7 years later, and asking me to produce a movie of his, which I don't know maybe it was the Merlin movie or something. At the time I was in graduate school, and I sort of wouldn't be able to take that on. I think I told him I'd think about it and we'd talk again later, but I never talked to him again, and didn't find out from you that he had passed away sort of I don't know if it was that time period or a couple years later or whatever, but
I think it was probably around 2000.
Yeah.
Yeah, or early aughts. Yeah.
Yeah.
He died fairly young. Yeah.
Okay, so that was much later than that he passed away, unfortunately. At the time, you had mentioned another film. You were doing a lot of these little. You were doing effects for a lot of these little film projects, and you were talking about Star Worms. Now, apparently I worked on Star Worms, according to you.
You did, yeah. You blocked it out, which is.
I did. I don't remember Star Worms.
Survival tactic
What was I doing on Star Worms?
I'm trying to think. So after. The Devil's Gift picked up distribution, and not only was it rehashed into Merlin, but it went to video. I still have a VHS copy, the official VHS with the printed box. And Vestron Video picked it up.
Okay.
On Vestron. It also was on USA Network, which I don't think is around anymore. But back in the 80s, USA Network used to run Saturday night horror movies.
Got it.
That was on heavy rotation. They played that thing like twice a month for a year.
Wow.
And I was sitting there saying, I'm making bank, man. Look at this. We got this deal over here. I got VHS. And I actually called the guy. I can't remember the guy's name who ran the Zenith International. That was the name of the distribution company, the production company that picked it up. And I called him, and he said, I'd love to give you some money, but the lead actor and actress sued to get all their money first before anyone else got paid, which is against the way the contracts were written. And now it's gone to court, and everything's frozen. And then after that, I lost contact, so I don't know whatever happened with the money. Mm-hmm. So, two-time loser, no money from the clone, no money from the Devil's Gift. So I'm like, oh, this is going well. And so, but Adam and I kept going around. We went to a meeting in the Castro district in San Francisco with a guy named Doris Fish.
Doris Fish, okay.
And he had a few friends, and they were working on a movie called Vegas in Space. And, it was a drag queen film.
Okay.
And we watched some dailies and stuff like that. And, we kind of looked at each other like, well, this is not really where we saw things going. But we had the usual conversations. And usually by this time, when I was sitting down to talk to anyone who wanted effects work for a film, because there were lots of conversations, I always say, look, don't take this wrong. I'm a pragmatic guy. I just have to ask the question, do you have any money? And they're like, oh, no, we'll use toilet tubes and lipstick container. And I'm like, okay, probably this isn't the project for us. We really appreciate talking, and we walked out of there. All right, and so we finally met the guy who was making a movie called Star Prison. And Star Prison was sort of a science fiction drama, that kind of reminiscent in some ways of maybe not Flights of Fantasy, but like some of the darker kind of stuff that was being made in the 80s, science fiction, not really horror, but science fiction dramas that had darker elements. And he needed effects. And Ab and I met with him, and, he had some money. We basically did the whole project. You could probably not buy a decent car.
Okay.
At the time.
That
gives you the scope of the, so it was like, pinching every penny.
Right.
And, of course, we needed people who were willing to work for free, and I thought of you.
So, I was number one on your list.
You were the only one. You were the only contact I hadn't burned yet, completely. Completely. It's like, this guy might still take my call.
You did burn it. I'm just a glutton for punishment, obviously. So, I took your call.
Yeah, Ed's call. It's like almost this sort of like bizarre fascination. How much more pain will he inflict?
How much pain will he take?
So you got sucked into it. Your friend Patrick
Loungeway worked on it. Yeah,
there was another guy, and I feel bad because we couldn't have made the film if it was for him. He was this guy who was working on a horror movie about Dracula at the time, and he was friends with one of the company that rented lighting equipment. I can't remember the name of the company either. All these names are forgotten, but the bottom line is he was like, I can get you free lighting equipment. We're like, sold American. You're on the project. He was, just doing it because all of us were doing this because we wanted to be making films.
Sure,
right.
It's
like if we can get money, that'd be great. If we don't, at least we got to make a film. So he brought in the lighting equipment. I rented that. You don't remember that we were in like a warehouse?
I do, and it was
South San Francisco.
I remember. Wait, it was South San Francisco. I remember it.
South of Market.
Sort of, south of Market. I remember some dingy neighborhood that we were kind of in.
Very gritty neighborhood.
Yeah.
Lots of like old warehouse buildings that had been converted into lofts, and this was like a garage, literally.
Yeah.
Had like the rolling double door kind of place that people used to drive vehicles into their work. But not only were we were renting that. I paid like $100 a month for that, just so you know. I mean, I was legit, right? There was also a guy living in the back.
No, I didn't know that. Like while we were shooting,
yes.
there was a guy living there. While you just hung duvetine up over his apartment, his bedroom.
He had a little trailer, okay, that he had pulled because it was a double door deal. You could actually pull a vehicle, and he had pulled in a little trailer and dropped it there.
Wow,
tiny little, like maybe a 14-foot long trailer, just big enough for one person, sitting at the back. And he was living in that, and he was an artist.
Okay.
He was painting all these canvases that were all like weird and distorted, and he would sleep all day and then wake up and paint all night. So we didn't really interfere too much with each other's schedules. So he was at the back, we were in the middle, and that's where we shot a fair amount of the effects for that. That was the part you were involved in.
Right, I remember that, yeah.
And then, the producer rejected about half of that.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't good enough for him.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, dude... beggars can't be choosers. But he's like, no, these shots, he was like, this is not what you promised you'd deliver. And I'm like, okay, fine. So we ended up reshooting a lot of it, literally with animation.
Uh-huh.
Which is an idea we stole from an old Doug Trumbull movie called Silent Running. A funny little sidebar there. It's a movie you can get. It's Bruce Dern stars, and it's a sci-fi ecological drama called Silent Running. They built this gigantic spaceship model. It was like about 35 feet long for this movie. And they realized they were going to shoot it on the soundstage, kind of like the 2001 stuff that he did, where they would, put it on gimbals and do like screw drives and move it slowly. And they found out we actually can't get it out of the room. It's too big, and not only that, it's not strong enough. We try to move it, it's going to break. Mm-hmm. So what they ended up doing is taking a bunch of pictures and then cutting the pictures out and shooting them on an animation stand with some star fields and stuff like that. That's what we ended up doing. I took a bunch of pictures of this stuff. We couldn't rent a room anymore. We knew somebody would give us a little space in their warehouse. We set up an animation stand. We reshot about 3/4 of the stuff just using like cutout animation.
Wow.
Even then, we were having problems with the cameras that we had borrowed, and at this point, I could tell you I was getting pretty disillusioned.
Right.
And when we finally wrapped up that project and he accepted what we turned in, I was like, I don't think I'm going to go after any more of these. At this point, Adam had moved on.
Right.
He
had. Yeah.
He was shooting a lot of commercials.
Okay. I remember,
making a decent living doing that, but he was getting very disillusioned with the way his career was going for very different reasons.
Yeah.
He was making money, but he didn't like what he was doing. Mm-hmm. I didn't like what I was doing, and I wasn't making any money. I was a two-time loser. So that's where I said, you know what? I can take these skills, and I know people who will actually pay me to do what I'm doing, not for Hollywood, but they'll pay. So that's why I ended up. That's how I kind of fell out of it, and that's when you ended up going down to USC, and that was sort of that was the end of our mutual involvement. Unless I've left something out.
No. At the time, there was no internet. If you kept in touch with people, you were either calling them on the phone or writing letters to them. You couldn't send an email. You didn't have instant access to everyone. You couldn't text anybody. You couldn't call them on their cell phones just because that technology didn't exist. So a lot of times what would happen if you left San Francisco, for instance, or the Bay Area, you really, for the most part, lost touch with everybody. And occasionally you would bump into them or call each other, but you'd have to make a lot of effort to stay in touch with people. So I think Star Prison / Star Worms was kind of the end of it for you.
That was the end of it, yeah.
You went down to, San Diego, and
I did.
And you became a model builder for like architecture companies for a while or something?
I started doing it when I was living in the North Bay, and then, so we finished up Star Prison, and I guess it was probably about a year later. I'd already moved down to San Diego that I actually got a call from the producer. Mm-hmm. And he said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that Star Prison was sold to Troma. Mm-hmm. Troma Entertainment. Mm-hmm. Like I said, they'd buy anything that was an hour and a half long and had a beginning, middle, and an end. And they changed the title to Star Worms 2: Attack of the Pleasure Pods. Of course, there was no Star Wars 1, but that was just part of the intrigue. And he sent me, I'm like, great. I said, that's great. So you're going to pay me my deferred participation now? And he's like, no, sorry. He said, For what I sold it for, I didn't even make back my investment. So, according to the terms of the contract, there's no money to distribute. But,
of course.
Hey, I'll send you a really nifty slick that they made. You know, they painted this ridiculous art of this woman with gigantic boobs and a laser blaster shooting at these giant star worms. They're trying to... Nothing having to do with the actual film whatsoever.
Right.
But,
did you at least get a T-shirt that you got to pay $8 for?
I did not.
No.
But he didn't make me pay for the little flyer he sent me. He sent that free. So I guess... I did have to buy a copy of the film, though. Eventually, it showed up on a double feature DVD, and I have it somewhere around here. But
oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started, after that, I'm like, I just think I really kind of need to be able to pay rent and eat and stuff like that. So I started working as a model maker. I went to work for a guy in, I think, Concord, which is north of Walnut Creek. And he trained me on a lot of the basic things like how to read scale blueprints and use engineering scales and how to work with most of the basic equipment that they use. And then when I moved to San Francisco, I worked for one guy pretty much exclusively there. And then when I moved down to San Diego, I just kept doing it right up until the economic crash hit in like 1990. And then it was a big change for me. But I actually got to make money building models for a long time. There was one final coda to the whole model building for film that I'm wondering if you were involved. Did you ever get involved with Boynton Films? Do you remember Paul Boynton?
It doesn't ring a bell.
So there was this commercial for, I think, KRON TV that was like all this flyover stuff that used miniatures that was very popular running in the Bay Area, where you started like in the White House and you flew out of the White House in D.C. and then you flew over the clouds and you flew to the Capitol building in Sacramento and then you flew out of that and then you were flying over the Bay Bridge and around Telegraph Hill and then right into the window of some like Victorian in San Francisco and then KRON TV's on the TV screen.
Okay.
And it was mostly done with models, and this guy Boynton got the contract for that. And once again, he had everyone work for free. And I worked on it, Adam worked on it, John Gonzalez, you might remember him from The Devil's Gift, the big burly dude who did a lot of lighting stuff. He worked on it. And Boynton got a couple more projects, and then he was supposed to but he never paid. You're always working for valuable experience.
Right.
And so, but that bit him in the ass one time. He had another commercial that he was doing where he had to build a model of the Transamerica building in San Francisco. And it was for Transamerica, for their insurance company. And he found some guy who was going to build the building, and he was down to the wire, and the guy took off with a bunch of like plastic and stuff and then just disappeared. And so he was coming up on a shoot. He's like, this was like Friday, and he was supposed to shoot on Monday. He didn't have the star model, the tower. There was nothing. So he called me. And he said, I'll actually pay.
I'll actually pay you.
He will actually pay. I will pay you to build me this model. And I thought about it, and I'm like, dude, it's like I would have had to pull like a 36 hours straight.
You'd have probably had to call me.
I probably would have had to call you
to
and
work
all
for
the other
free.
guys and work for free for Violent Express. I said, I'm sorry, I'm just really not available. I'm sorry that you're in this predicament, but I can't meet your deadline. It's not that I don't want to do it. I can't work straight through the weekend to do this, so I'm just going to have to say no.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we finally got it done. I mean, the guy was up against it, but that was the last time that I was offered a job in film effects in Northern California. The only time I was ever offered money.
Interesting.
And
you turned it down. Wow. Well, good thing the internet was invented, or at least it was made available to everybody else beyond just the military, because eventually we were able to get back in touch with each other. Since we've known each other now, I guess for 35 years or something like that.
Something like that.
And even though we didn't see each other for a long time, once email was available and Google and so on, eventually we did make that connection, probably through Facebook, I'm guessing, and I'm in touch with Adam as well. But even though you didn't go down the rabbit hole of working in movies, which was probably the wisest decision you ever made, you certainly had a lot of fun adventures dabbling in filmmaking and doing the work that you did do. And I certainly shared a lot of those adventures with you as well, which are stories that every time we talk, those stories will come up over and over and over again just because of how bizarre they are. There's a lot of stories we didn't touch on in this conversation that just crack us up because of how strange everything was during that time. But thank God you can find The Devil's Gift on YouTube, and we can sort of see what the end result was of all of of that ridiculous work and all of those fun adventures we had gone on. I can't find the clone. I don't know about Star Worms, apparently, or Star Worms 2.
Star Wars 2, yeah.
Yep.
Don't get it, not to be confused with Star Wars 1, a non-existent film. Yeah.
No. But
You can get the trailer for Star Worms on YouTube.
Oh, you can?
And it is better than the movie.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I actually give credit to Troma. They cut together a trailer using the very best moments that promises a bunch of excitement that does not exist. They did
Okay.
a fantastic job. So
Perfect.
check it out. Minute and 30 seconds.
Nice. That's great. Perfect. Well, thanks so much for hashing through all of these stories. You certainly gave me a lot of fun adventures in my teenage years as I was
Wow.
exploring filmmaking myself and trying to figure out what this world was all about. You dragged me through some pretty interesting projects that I'm sure I was kicking and screaming at the time about, but at 35 years later, I couldn't be happier that I was a part of those. I've gotten a lot of humor from reliving those moments, and glad I got to meet you on the clone, and that 35 years later we're sitting here still having these conversations, and I hope we still have these conversations for another 35 years.
Absolutely. Now, I do get paid for this interview, right?
Yeah, well,
Deferred participation?
you know what? There's I wasn't able to sell this recording to recoup my initial
you didn't break
investment.
even,
So
huh?
there's a whole rolling break even thing. There's a
Heard
book
about this
written of
rolling
Art
break.
Buchwald and the Coming to America case. Maybe you're familiar with it.
Yes,
So
I might have heard something about it. Yeah.
yeah. So thanks again, and what a great time we had. Really enjoyed it.
Anytime.
Okay. All right, Ed. This is Ed LaFrance and Scott Benton reminiscing about the films they worked on in the 1980s, and what a lot of fun we had with that.
Indeed.
All right. Take care.